Parker Stiles joins me here today. And if you're interested in some hard money, head over to fasttrackfunding.com. If you're interested in Parker doing some coaching, head over to coachingwithparker.com. Those are both going to be clickable links in the show notes. Parker, it's great to catch up.
We have, yeah. Been about 8 or 9 years or so. I think Matt Terrio connected us together. And that was my first quote unquote mentor in the space that got me started in all this craziness.
Well, same here. Matt's been great, and I still talk to Matt to this day. So it's a good connection.
Yeah.
So we were talking before we hit record. You were saying you've had to learn to pivot quite a bit in your business. Can you talk a little bit about all of that? What are you working on right now?
Yeah. I started in 2015, full time, January 2015, really started dipping my feet in like summer 2016. We got comfortable in 20. I'm not saying there weren't still issues, but like 2017, 18, 19, like it was 3 solid years of the market continuing to get better. Hedge funds started coming in, interest rates were record lows. And it just was like tweak, improve, grow, tweak, improve, grow. And the deals just seem to flow in. Maybe I'm thinking a little bit kind of highlight reel because of how long that it's been, but I miss those days. I think we got comfortable with that stuff. And then starting in 2020, I feel like for 5 years, I've just been running a lot of pivots, not making major changes, but rolling with the punches. It's been very educational. I've built multiple other businesses around my flipping business, and I've just learned immensely and have grown my foundation of, if everything came crumbling down, while that would be terrible, I know how to put things back together again, do it in a way that, surrounds my lifestyle. And that's really what I've focused on, is not necessarily building to have the highest revenue or the most amount of deals or even the most amount of net profit. I have a certain lifestyle and work/freedom time that I want to have. And that sometimes means I'm not making as much money as the guy who's out on planes flying around all the time with the networking and doing the shows and different partnerships and all the stuff. I think that can be distracting. We can be distracted to think we want that. And some people really do want that. And that's great. With where I am, with the family that I have, with the way my wife is, we've just gotten on the same page with like what we want. And we've been fortunate enough to check most of those boxes, at a young age. Now it's just like, don't get distracted and don't keep moving the goalpost. Now I'm in a period of where I just want a little bit more consistency, and I want cushion in all the accounts. I want safety nets. I want backup safety nets, and I want to focus on passive income that, continues to come in, whether I'm flipping houses or sending out the next mail campaign or doing loans or not. So that's what I'm focused on. But the pivots that I have made have been directly around South Carolina and the bill that they passed making wholesaling illegal, because wholesaling in South Carolina is where the majority of my money has come the last 5-6 years or so.
That had to have been really jarring. Like, what was it, like an overnight change, or did you see it coming?
We saw it coming, but it happened really fast. I mean, in a period of like 4 months, it went from proposal to passed. The wording, they did a good job with the wording to kind of just block out everything. There's some of it that doesn't make sense. There's some of it that's gray. But when you read deeper into the lines, and it's kind of left up to interpretation of the attorney or the judge as well. And we know what happens when the investor goes up against the, grandma, grandpa homeowner, right? We usually don't get looked at in the best light, even though we sometimes are providing the service that they asked for at the price that they asked for it. But that's not always how it shakes out. So it got passed, and what it essentially means is, if you are wholesaling property, you must have a real estate license in the state of South Carolina. If you have a real estate license in the state of South Carolina, you cannot wholesale property. So it cuts it out for everybody, and they define wholesaling as marketing a property prior to taking legal ownership. So you can't double close to get around it, because if you already had your buyer before you bought it, what'd you do before you owned it? You marketed
Right.
the property. The only ways that we are still doing deals in South Carolina are if we are purchasing the property through an installment sale. So it's a little messier. There's some payment up front that's required. It's definitely not as easy to unwind as like sending a termination and release would be if you find out something later in the property. So, there's more inspections up front. There's a little bit more time involved. There's pulling title and making sure everything's clear before we, send a deposit, things like that. Or just taking it down cash and wholetailing it or rehabbing it. But that voids some deals because the discount just can't be had. You think about all the deals that you do as a wholesaler where it's like, I could probably squeeze out 10, 15 grand here. Like I wouldn't buy it because I don't think the discount's really there, and there could be some unforeseen, but it's worth throwing it against the wall to see what sticks. Somebody's probably going to be willing to pay the price. And in my opinion, that is the majority of wholesaling, and that is providing a value to the seller. That is giving an option to the seller that a realtor cannot provide, usually is not going to provide. It's still going to be a net to the seller price. They're getting to skip all the hassle of dealing with a sale, and a lot of times leaving a bunch of junk in the property. There's just a lot of problems that wholesalers have to solve that realtors would never have the time nor the bandwidth to want to deal with. I think pulling wholesalers out of South Carolina is going to do a couple things. It could be good in the long run. The problem is right here in the middle, there's still a lot of people out there doing it that are waiting to get slapped on the wrist. Me with a full team, my break even is $110,000 a month. I've got a lot of payroll going out, bunch of marketing, mouths to feed. I've got a lot of other things going on that if I got sued and wrapped up in something like that, I mean, it would wreck me. And I know a buddy that got sued and just got out of a cold calling lawsuit. And this was last year, and he's out about $1.2 million, not to mention about a year and a half of just getting run through the washing machine over and over again. Sleepless nights, scared from losing everything, scared of being able for that corporate veil to be pierced to where they can come after him personally. It's just not worth it. I was like, we're just going to stop. We'll go to different states. We're going to take a hit for a little while because we're going to change some drastic things. But on the other side, it's going to build a stronger company. It's going to eliminate many single points of failure for copy legislation that eventually comes into other states as well. South Carolina just happens to be the worst. Lucky me. But like I said, it's going to penalize the seller, in my opinion. When you remove all the wholesalers and you remove the ability to go contract a property and see if you can sling it out there to higher paying buyers and try and make a profit, then, and what does that do when you have competing buyers and you have a lot of wholesalers out there making offers? What does that do to the price, the offer price of the home via
always goes up.
competition? It raises it up. Competition raises the price. So if you eliminate all the wholesalers out there, what investors, rehabbers, and landlords, would you say it's safe to say they've gotten pretty lazy the last 10 years from wholesalers coming in and feeding them deals? Like, that's a real deal source for those guys. Imagine all the wholesalers evaporate overnight, which is not how this is going to happen, but say it were to. And now the only people out there buying are the ones that have to go on title, take ownership of the property, utilities, insurance, all the thing. Like, they own it. First of all, very few wholesalers are going to do that because they're only wholesalers. They're not also investors. A wholesaler is not an investor, in my opinion. And so you're only going to be left with the guys taking title. What is that going to do to the offer prices? It's going to drop them. So what does that do to the seller? It just nets them less money. How does this help the seller if it just gets them less money by reducing the competition, therefore being able to come in and get prices at lower dollars because their only options are the investor that's going to buy it cash at a discount, a deep discount, or going retail on the MLS through an agent? I mean, you can't do novations. That's even actually more frowned upon in most attorneys' eyes and brokers as well in the state of South Carolina. So it really just reduces options.
No. Well, we're seeing this type of regulation popping up everywhere. In fact, it's happened in my backyard as well. Like we've
Really.
had to pivot a little bit, but thankfully we're in the position where we don't have to do the double closing in the traditional sense anymore. So that's helped. But unless you have the mindset like you do, Parker, where you find a pivot and you make some changes to your business, the wholesalers, for the most part, many of them are just going to stop operating and go back to
Go
the
back, I can get a W-2.
yeah.
So, where that stress and, fear and uncertainty comes, like there's opportunity within that. The struggle is finding that opportunity. And maybe the opportunity is not there right now. Maybe the opportunity is on the other end of all of this BS that I'm having to go through. And it's, I'm frustrated that it's not here yet. But again, we're not selling candy bars. We're selling houses, and that has a longer cash conversion cycle, somewhere 4 to 5 months. So I can't expect to pivot, make multiple massive pivots to statewide PPC in 8 states, to 50% of our transactions going from wholesale to novations now, which changes the scripting, which changes how we run our numbers, which changes how my dispo team gets rid of the deals. The buyer pool changes, the scripting to the buyer pool changes. It's just, and then new areas, new pipelines, new sellers, and those people take a certain amount of time until they turn into a contract and then turn into a deal and then get on, So it's a while to get that cash back from the dollar that you spent. So you can't be impatient with that. But the struggling, stressful part for me has been, I got to have the runway and I got to have the financial and mental bandwidth to get to that point on the other side, where hopefully that payoff, that opportunity comes. And that's, luckily, thank God, I've built a rental portfolio. I've invested in commercial real estate. I've got passive income. I've done some oil and gas mineral rights stuff. I've syndications, so like I have something. I've started a hard money lending business. I have other income coming in where that sometimes is feeding those other businesses, or that's feeding me personally while I'm not getting the juice from the squeeze on the flipping side. So I'm thankful that I've diversified and vertically integrated, because if all that I would have done is flip houses for 10 years, that money just finds a way to leave you somehow. It just goes into different things. It goes back into business. It goes into toys that end up drying up and disappearing, whatever it is. Vacations, make memories. I'm always a fan of using money to make lasting memories versus things. But if that's all I had done, I'd be much more frustrated right now and asking myself, like, what was it all for? What have I built the last decade that seems like, it's, crumbling, and I'm being dramatic, but you get what I mean. You want to build wealth along the way.
Yeah. When South Carolina happened and you had to pivot, I'm sure a little panic would have set in a little bit. How did you determine what rabbit to chase and how you were going to actually pivot?
I had been thinking for a while that I wanted to go have PPC be one of my marketing strategies and I've done PPC many times over the years, but with agencies, but I wanted to learn PPC myself. I knew a couple guys, Brian Manley, Nick Perry, some other guys that have just really learned PPC and manage it on their own. And it doesn't take much time after you get the understanding of it. And once you do that, like, you hold the keys to marketing. It's infinitely scalable. You can go all across the country. You can turn markets on and off with the flip of a couple buttons. That is immense power that you hold. Every wholesaler, every student that I have, whether they're a wholesaler or an investor, lead flow, deal flow, it's all lead based. If you can control the leads, if the leads flowing into your CRM are not dependent upon an agency who the first couple calls are good and they're giving you all these recommendations, but then after a couple months in, you realize they didn't look at your stuff until the next call that you just got on with them. Direct mail campaigns not hitting on time or not going out. PPC is just, it's in your control. And I wanted that for a while. And so when I saw this coming up, I was like, if I'm going to have to make a pivot to go into other states, PPC is going to be the way to do that. But then the next is, if I'm going to be going into these other states, I'm going to need investor lift. So I need to keep that expensive account so I can get these buyers in all these new areas. Cause I may do a deal in Fremont, Indiana, and then I may not ever do a deal there again for like another 12 months, right? But I'll be doing deals all over the place, and I can't build an individual organic buyers list like I've done in the past when I was deep versus wide. I need a service like investor lift. Then I also need to be able to take stuff to the MLS. So I need to better understand and master the Novation, EPP, RBP, whatever you want to call it, process to lock in a discount still, but be able to use the MLS as my buyers list.
Just to remind everybody, if you want to learn more directly from Parker, head over to coachingwithparker.com. We're going to get into this novation concept here very soon, but coachingwithparker.com. If you're looking for some hard money, fasttrackfunding.com. If you found some value in what we're talking about so far, do us a quick favor, share this with an investor friend. And if you're watching us on YouTube, give us a quick like and subscribe. So Parker, you mentioned the novation concept a couple times, and I've had a couple people on talking about this, but it seems to be starting to get some legs. Can you kind of break down what novation is and why you chose that strategy?
I chose it because it opens up the MLS as a buyer pool. And that's the nation's biggest buyers list is the MLS. It does have legs as a strategy, but the tricky part about it is it's very state dependent upon what paperwork needs to be used. And even the closing attorneys and even the lenders for the buyers can throw wrenches in that process. Do you use an attorney in fact, or do you use a POA, or you can't use a POA because a POA means that you're, acting in the best interest of the person you're getting attorney for. And if you're making profit off the transaction, how can you be working in their best interest? In Ohio, you have to have a POA versus you can't use an attorney in fact. But then we found another attorney who said, no, that's not true. I do it with attorney. So it's very inconsistent. We can get a property under contract. The goal, we call them EPP option deals or EPP only deals. EPP stands for Equity Protection Program. We don't throw around the word novation to sellers. It sounds scary. Nobody knows how to, properly explain it. It's just an equity protection program that your property qualifies for in certain areas. For example, our rule is if there's not a Walmart in the local vicinity, either a Home Depot or a Lowe's, a big box hardware store, then we are EPP only. We'll not deliver a cash offer because we don't trust our ability to find a buyer in areas that don't have that because they're so difficult to move those deals. Now, we may still offer a cash offer, but it would only be after an override approval from a manager, and it's going to be severely low. So we're pushing those Novation or EPP deals so we can get to the MLS and find the local buyers who are buying in that area. Investor Lift, it can help you with that process, but we've still found it difficult in some of those areas. So back to EPP only and EPP option. EPP only deals would be when you ride your price up because the seller negotiates you too high in your price to where you only have the ability to do a novation. That's the only way you're going to squeeze away 15, 20 grand in profit is by getting it on the MLS and getting EPP terms. EPP option deals are what we want. That's where we get the ability to novate it, or we run it through the EPP process and we have the same price that we would have gotten it cash for a wholesale deal. So you got a great discount. And now instead of taking it to your off-market organic buyers list where everybody wants a great deal, you're taking it to the MLS and maybe still selling it to a cash buyer. But would you say cash buyers pay more that shop on the MLS than the ones that are on Investor Lift?
Of course.
And then maybe you sell it to a retail buyer. And if a retail buyer is purchasing it, then are they making a logical purchase or an emotional purchase?
Emotional.
Their prices tend to be higher than your investor price. Now there's a little bit more to deal with on the retail side. You got a little bit longer timeline. You got to wait for financing. There's some more pickiness when it comes to, I want this fixed or I want this repaired. And that's part of that process is you have to be willing to fix lender. We usually don't renovate the house, but we'll do lender required repairs or credits or concessions that will come out of our fee. And if needed, we'll renegotiate, but we try to have it come out of our fee because that's our pitch. That's required to close.
Mm-hmm. So let's break this down a little bit, Parker. Let's go fifth grade level here. So
Okay.
if somebody comes to you, you got a lead, talk a little bit about that process. How does this work? And how did your salespeople had to change their pitch?
We tweaked our pitch to be more of a buyer finder service versus just the buyer. When you're the buyer and you're wholesaling the deal, you got to hide the fact that you're not the buyer. You got to be, it's just annoying to have to cover that up. If you go ahead and you set that expectation up front, which is that's what I've found is it's all about expectation settings and clarity up front with the seller. If you properly set expectations up front, you can, get almost anything pushed by smoothly on the back end. Now you don't set those proper expectations and then you have a surprise, you're going to end up with a whole fire to have to try and put out. When a lead comes in, we're now not the buyer. We're a service that brings them a buyer. We do that in a couple ways. There's the cash offer and we partner with a cash buyer and we get the deal done, or there's the EPP option if your property qualifies for that. And that is where we would partner with one of our agents locally and we would get the property marketed to the full extent. We would handle the walkthroughs, the negotiations. We pay for commissions. We'll pay for your closing costs. We'll pay for even if the roof has to be replaced before the property closes because the lender requires it. We'll either offer a credit if the lender approves, or I'll get our guys out there and we'll replace the roof for you and pay for that. So that's like when they say, why wouldn't I just list it? An agent's not going to do those things. Is an agent paying your commissions for you? Like they're going to, oh yeah, well, here's some recommendations on who you could get the roof replaced with. I really recommend that you do it. And I think we should paint these cabinets and blah, blah, blah. So we dropped the first initial offer and it's our cash offer and it's a price anchor offer. It's a shocking kind of number. And it's, I'm sure you would never agree to this number, but this is for, we say investors in your area looking for properties that are in the condition that yours is in, based on where we are in the market right now, they're going to be somewhere around this range. But that's the initial price anchor. Then we're coming in with, I did get it approved for our equity protection program, which not all properties do, but this one would qualify. And I think it's a way I can put a good bit more money in your pocket. Are you open to hearing about that? And then we're going into that EPP process. We're trying not to overcomplicate it where we could offer, X. It's going to be more of like a 60 business day type transaction versus, a few weeks. And if you can give a little bit of leniency on speed and convenience, then you're going to put more dollars in your pocket. So all that's doing is using a low cash offer, a quick close to push them to the EPP option, which is what we want. So we have the ability to take it to MLS. We find that less of our EPP deals fall out of contract in comparison to our cash deals right now, just because of where inventory and interest rates are at. It's making some of that stuff difficult to sell, especially in the slower moving areas. So if they say they don't like trading convenience and speed for equity, then you push them back to cash. And so it's a seesaw. What's more important to you, speed and convenience or price? Those are the two ends of the seesaw. Normally, everybody says price is most important.
Mm-hmm.
And then they say, okay, well, if I give you more, this is what it's going to look like. And they say, oh, no, I don't want to wait that long. It's like, well, what do you want? What's more important to you? You said the number was, but now it sounds like speed is more important. Well, if you want speed, we can do this, but we need a discount. You're going to trade some equity for the speed, peace of mind, and convenience of the cash transaction. And you just go back and forth until you verbally back them into the corner that they truly are standing in, because they're acting like they're over here, but really they're over here in this one. And you just have to conversate with them and help guide them to what is actually most important to them. Because some of the people that we work with, they don't know what they really want. They don't know what's most important to them. They're getting all these offers and options and they're just overwhelmed. They don't do this every day. Maybe they've never sold a house. So it's getting more sales based. But the tip that I give my sales team is don't be a buyer, be an advisor, not a buyer, an advisor. Like sometimes you have to take your buyer hat off. Susie, let's take a step back for a second. I've been doing this a while, but so I've seen a lot of scenarios. But I'm going to take my buyer hat off for a second and just put I know we don't know each other personally, but I'm going to put my friend / advisor hat on. Are you good with that? Is that all right? And so then you go into that conversation of there's two ways to sell a house, right? There's the retail route and there's the investment route. We've talked about the investment route. I feel like you understand that. Let's go kind of down the retail road. You've hinted at it. You said you had an agent friend. We've said we could list your property as well, but you've pushed back a little bit on it because of certain things. I just want to show you what it looks like. As an advisor, my goal is for you to comfortably understand what the destination of each road looks like when you get down each road. If you confidently understand the destination of each option, then you can make a data-based, confident decision with your husband, Jerry, and you guys can get back with me. And if that's working with me, I'd love that. That would be awesome. But to be honest, we're going to keep buying houses. We don't buy every house we see, and it's okay if this doesn't work out. Then we go into the apples to apples conversation. We have a script and a calculator. I go over this a lot in my private coaching group, the Private Wealth Academy, where we strategically get sellers to come down to earth on their high asking prices because they're not comparing an apple to an apple like they think they are. They think they're comparing my friend down the street sold for $275. Why are you offering me $175? It's like they're comparing an apple to an orange. So we have this script / calculator that converts that $275 into a real number that is a comparable apple-like number to our number, backing out all of the costs that they have, backing out the timeline and the holding costs that would be associated to completing that process down the retail route. And so you get to the end of that road, the retail road, and you're left with what they would actually be putting in their pocket on a projected basis, which is all that matters. Do you care, Mr. Seller, now that you understand this? Do you care what the house sells for on the MLS if you're only going to put 75 grand less than that in your pocket? Like you can't spend that money, so it doesn't matter to you. And then once they get on that front, then they're like, okay, I get it. And the final sentence of that script, that apples to apple script is, so Susie, really the only, question that you and Jerry have to ask yourself is it worth trading roughly $14,000 in equity? Because that's the difference between what our offer is and what they could net after all the stuff over X period of time. Is it willing to trade that amount of equity for hitting the easy button? Skipping the appraisals and the inspections and fixing those things we mentioned and the open houses and all the stuff. Just take what you want out of the house, leave the rest, spill a drink on the way out. Like we've got the rest, and you're on to picture perfect scenario that you've helped them paint, hopefully by this point in time, of what's next for them. And I can't answer that for you guys. That's something I want you to think about and come up with. And I'd love to chat. Is 2:00 tomorrow good for us to maybe come back full circle on this? So I went way longer than I was planning to on that, but that's the sales process in a nutshell.
No, I appreciate you doing that. That added a ton of value to this episode, Parker. And most people are asking for scripts and how do you talk to these individuals? I really like that you call this an equity protection program, because I know for a fact when you mentioned Novation, most investors don't know what that is, let alone a seller.
Yeah, exactly.
So it sounds like you have to provide some education to the possible seller, but could you talk a little bit like how quickly did your sales team adapt to this new scenario?
We started filling the Novation pipeline up in our dispo funnel after about 4 weeks
Pretty
of
quick.
tweaking the script, doing training on the script, listening to calls. We had this cool service that we use called call criteria. It's a really ninja service that we have. They listen to every call, every discovery call, every follow-up call, every sales call. They listen to our appointment setters calls. They listen to my dispo guys calls. And every call from the prior day is graded on a rubric and sent to my sales manager the next morning with a report card of all the things they hit and missed that day on their calls. I went from my sales manager listening to one sales call per agent per week
Hmm.
to every call being listened to across multiple positions. It's a human-based, AI-supported service. They're humans listening to the calls and providing feedback. They're providing faster starts for new salespeople getting online and confidently executing calls without a sales manager having to listen to every single call, which just isn't possible with all the other tasks that have to be done. It is providing the ability to get deeper discounts and find out more about the property, because we found that most of our agents were just skipping. We were failing all these tests. All these scores were coming in as Fs when we first started. They were skipping things that we had no idea they were skipping, about condition, about permission to say no. The hard stuff that was uncomfortable to say just wasn't being said. And now they're getting dinged every time they don't say that, because a human is listening to every single call that goes out. And they know that on their morning report, they're going to get an average grade of their calls from yesterday. And that's going to hurt them in their daily score. So now we've gamified the process and they're fighting to do good and read the scripts. Imagine that. And so it's just been really cool to be able to have that service. And now my sales manager, instead of listening to all of the calls, can more so read the reports and know directly where to go. He doesn't have to search for where's the issue now. It's, I need to talk to these two people about these items that they're struggling with on the script. And the final thing that's cool is it's kind of like a found money opportunity. They've got where they will listen for things like dogs barking in the background, bad reception, somebody's voice just coming in really quiet. And overall, there's just not a good connection between the seller and the team member on the phone. It just wasn't clicking. That throws a red flag, notifies my managers, and gives them the notification to, hey, this might be somebody you should reach out to kind of give a manager override call to and see if you can maybe smooth things out a little bit, maybe connect them with another agent that they might work better with, or maybe just run it on your own and see if you can figure out why that connection wasn't good on the front end.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hate to save this towards the end of this episode, Parker, but you've done this for such a long time. What's been your biggest lesson so far in this whole real estate game?
I think the biggest lesson, it's hard for me to immediately come up with the biggest lesson because there's so many, but having to just get comfortable in the uncomfortable
Mhm.
areas, understanding that like things just don't last forever. You got to be able to pivot. It's not a set it. A business is not set it and forget it. There are periods where it's set it and forget it. I mentioned 2017 to 2020. It just kind of felt like it was on cruise control. And it hasn't felt like that at all, mainly because we've just been in a very difficult real estate market. But this too will change eventually.
Mhm.
Who knows when? And we're so primed now based on all of the banging our heads against walls and continuing to stay in the right rooms and figuring out what we're doing wrong and what we can do better, and investing in our people and finding better people that are smarter, wiser, have more experience than me in certain things. And in some cases, me just getting out of the way, to where when that time does come, we're going to knock the cover off the ball like we never were before. And I'm excited for that. But I think the lesson is just understanding that, like, you're going to have to make tweaks. You're going to have to make pivots. It's not going to be easy. It is uncomfortable. But when you get to the other side of those stressful times, that's when you get that feeling of it all was worth it, because you didn't do it all for somebody else. You did it for yourself. And now you get to reap the benefits of that. And that just has immense meaning to me, coming from someone who always like wanted to be, watching my dad, be his own boss, my dad's dad, my dad's dad's dad. I'm a fourth generation real estate investor. I've come to find out. I didn't even know this until like a few years ago, but that's just in me. And I felt that so strongly that I needed to do that for myself. But it took me a while to get there. I had some failed stuff up front. I got fired from a bunch of jobs. I had trouble finding where I wouldn't fit in the boxes that people were trying to make me fit inside of initially. Once I've kind of found that entrepreneur box, it's definitely not the easiest box to play around in, but it's extremely rewarding.
Well, Parker, this has just been fantastic. Again, head over to fasttrackfunding.com and coachingwithparker.com. Those are going to be clickable links in the show notes. Before we dive into the rapid fire questions and close out this episode, Parker, is there anything we should have hit on?
On the fast track and coaching side, we're funding in the Carolinas, so North and South Carolina and Georgia as well. We will fund in 36 hours from title being clear. We do not do upfront full appraisals. We're doing desktop. We're built by investors for investors. I've been lending money for 5 years now, mainly as a hobby, just to create some passive income. And then we decided the last couple of years to build a business around it. We're putting a fund in place and actually, putting in the systems, processes, employees, et cetera, to be able to scale. But I love funding other investors' loans, and I look at them just like I look at my own properties that I purchase. And I know what you guys want. I know how important the timeline is, even on the wholesaler side. We love working with wholesalers, and I'll actually pay half my points to wholesalers that link me with a buyer for their transactions. So a lot of my funding deals are funding the buyers that are buying my wholesale deals. So I double dip on the profits there, and we offer that to wholesalers. And first of all, if they don't have their own funding mechanism, I can help them build their own funding mechanism. I do coaching for that. But in the meantime, if they want to leverage us as being their internal funding mechanism for their buyers to where they can close even faster, they can send those deals through us, and I'll pay them half the points every time they connect me with a buyer. We also do transactional funding for wholesalers. Same day, quick cash in and out if you need that for any of your deals. On the coaching side, I have the Private Wealth Academy. It's got all the good stuff. It's got the vault of everything my team and business uses, from scripts to job ads to SOPs, calculators, just in a big Google Drive document. I do weekly coaching calls with our group where we get into the weeds on stuff. It includes access to me with one-on-one calls to help set goals, break down KPIs, and set a roadmap to help you get the scale of what you're looking to do. I'm not necessarily working with people that are looking to get started in real estate. I'm kind of niching down to who I'm helping, to people that have a business of sorts or a hobby of sorts, and they want to learn the systems and processes. They know how to do the thing to a certain extent already, but they want to go do it 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, and then build team members to be able to back themselves out of that business so they can buy their time back.
Well, I appreciate all of that, and I appreciate the highlights there, because there's a lot to unpack and what you have to offer. Parker, if you're ready, we'll dive into the rapid fire and close out this episode.
Let's do it.
What lie do real estate investors often tell themselves?
I have to invest in my backyard.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be?
I'm thinking go bigger sooner. Such a cliche one, but I'm starting to do some commercial stuff that's really cool. And I've seen how people have gone directly into commercial or directly into multifamily from the get go, and the scale of growth that I've seen with them versus starting with single family. I'm not saying that I would go back and do it differently because I love the path that I've taken. And it's been a very consistent path with growth. I know that we've mentioned pivots and stuff as of recent, but my path's kind of been like this. And I see a lot of people who are like, they have some bigger wins than me, and maybe they're further than I am right now, but I'm just not built to have everything burn down and lose it all or throw it all on black and hope it works. It's just not my thing. And I like that slower, maybe a little bit longer, but consistent increased trajectory. If I had to go back and give myself advice, I'd probably say think a little bigger, a little sooner, as much as you can. And that comes from you can only think as big as you can think. You can only think as big as what you know is possible. So how to do that tactically, not sure I'm saying that word right, is get in bigger rooms. And that includes paying to get in bigger rooms. You usually can't just slide in for free. So my first mastermind that I got in, I put it on a credit card. I didn't have the money, the $15,000, I think it was, for, paying for a year. But I was like, I got a 0% interest for 12 to 18 months. I started getting into these bigger rooms and I'm like, man, I've been thinking small. And so the sooner you can do that, the better.
Is it fair to say that that type of has been like your biggest return on investment?
Yeah, 100%.
I bring that up because it's just such a mindset shift for most people. They typically see it as an expense, and it's just hard to
It's
get
hard to
through it.
It's hard to say like this money came from that tip that guy gave me in that room. And logical and an overthinker like I am, like you want to match this to that and this to that.
Right.
And you can't always do that with that type of feedback. I used to come back with 10, 15 pages of notes and all these things that I wanted to change and implement. Now it's just kind of tweaking the knobs. It's little improvements and how those scale over time. It's becoming more thought based action versus tactical things that I'm doing. It's more feeding into my team and the people that do the things than me actually going out and doing different things. And so it's just kind of a cool process, but you got to get in the rooms first.
Yeah. I've definitely learned too is that, yeah, you get all fired up and you come with all these ideas, but if you're throwing a ton of change, everybody all at once, then nothing happens. So it's like baby
Very
steps
hard.
on some of that stuff.
Exactly.
Do you have a book recommendation?
I'm reading Your Next 5 Moves right now. Your Next 5 Moves. It's on Audible. I'm sure it'll be the first thing that pops up. That is a good book about thinking ahead and getting out of in the moment and, being proactive. But my favorite book that I think I've read is The Psychology of Money.
I'm reading that one right now.
Oh, you are? Nice.
Yeah.
It's an incredible book. I've read it twice. It's just really good. It's a thinking about money book. It's not a in the weeds type of book, but it's great. It was recommended me by a coach of mine.
And then finally, what single strategy or tool have you implemented that has had the biggest time-saving impact to you or your business?
Repeat the question again.
What single strategy or tool have you implemented to save you some time?
I think for me, where I'm at right now, since I haven't been doing the specific things for a while in my flipping business, it's more so the people that I've brought on. So I guess the strategy would be delegation. I hired a general manager for my flipping business that's really was like that final piece to giving me back a ton of not just time, but like mental bandwidth. Somebody that I knew was running the marketing metrics and having the calls with the marketing providers and presenting the KPIs to me and putting out all the fires within the business and taking over the one-on-one calls that I was having with my sales manager and my director of administration and just kind of like the glue that like keeps everything functioning. You could say like director of operations, but general manager is his title. He hopped around from a couple different roles within the organization before that, came on as my first full-time recruiter, hired 52 acquisitions agents in about 10 months. But he went from that to running my office in Charlotte. I opened a brick and mortar office and did that for about a year, learned some lessons. And then he came in internally as general manager for the whole organization. And that's just been a blessing.
Well, Parker, this has just been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate the value you brought today. Fasttrackfunding.com and coachingwithparker.com. Those are going to be clickable links in the show notes, but hope you'll consider coming back again sometime. It was great catching up.
I'd love to. Thank you for having me.